We've talked a lot about the IRA, but which vehicle tax incentives or just incentives are available in Australia, in each individual Australian state? Let's quickly go over those and see why it is that one particular state, which claims it's very much into EVs, isn't really buying them at the same rate as other states. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm the Electric Viking. Great to see you. We've just seen EV sales figures for the month of April. Tesla, of course, took first place again. Unsurprisingly, Tesla took first and second with the Model Y and the Model 3. Of course, BYD did really well as well, with the Atto 3 in third place. It's a close race between the MG ZS EV and the Volvo XC40 for fifth place. But some states are buying these EVs at a much higher rate than others. For example, Canberra, 22% EV market share. I'm sure you've all heard about the EV incentives in Queensland, but it's not clear what the EV incentives are in all the other states. Federal incentives. The Labor government launched its first ever electric vehicle strategy in September of 2022. And in November of 2022, the Treasury Laws Amendment or Electric Car Discount Bill passed through the federal parliament, which will provide up to $2,000 off the purchase price of an EV and, unfortunately, a plug-in hybrid vehicle, as well as fringe benefits tax exemptions for fleets and novated leases, which are great because that's the kind of situation where a lot of people can't afford a new electric car. So once you get companies getting them en masse on novated leases, then in a few years' time, a lot of those cars will enter the used car market, giving a lot of people the option to get an affordable EV secondhand. The government will apply the exemption retrospectively to eligible cars first used on or after the 1st of July 2022. Plug-in hybrids will initially be covered, but the offer will expire on the 1st of April 2025. Taxes. The luxury car tax threshold. This is something you need to know about because it affects EVs differently to other cars. The threshold for low emission vehicles has been raised to $84,916. That means most Tesla vehicles now qualify, most Hyundai Ioniq 5s if you can get one, EV6 if you can get one. A lot of EVs now will qualify to not have to pay the luxury car taxes by going over the threshold, which was lower than that before. Now, the threshold for a non-EV or non-fuel efficient vehicle is $71,900, meaning if you buy an EV, the gap between a non-EV is $13,000. So basically, a lot more vehicles qualify for not having to pay the luxury car tax if they're electric. If they're not electric, more than likely, you'll have to pay the taxes. Alongside the removal of the fringe benefits tax, the 5% import tariff for EVs priced under the LCT limit has been cut. This means that fringe benefit tax savings amount to $9,000 per annum for an employer or $4,700 for an individual with a salary sacrifice agreement for a $50,000 electric vehicle. Massive discounts for fringe benefits tax. Cutting import tariffs drops purchase prices by a further $2,500 according to the documents. All of this comes together to mean EVs are actually much more affordable than many gasoline, petrol, diesel powered cars. You've got to do your research here. If you're going to go buy a vehicle, a new vehicle, or if your friend is, make sure you actually let them know about this stuff because a lot of people aren't aware that they can now get, for example, a vehicle like a Tesla Model Y, a Tesla Model 3, a BYD Atto 3 for on par in terms of purchase price with an equivalent gasoline, petrol, diesel powered car. Charging network. Federal EV infrastructure funding is through the Future Fuels Fund, run by the Australian Renewable Energy Agency or the ARENA, ARENA. It included a first round investment of $24.5 million to co-fund the rollout of 400 public fast charging stations with in partnership the private sector. Most recently in the 2022-23 budget, Labor announced a $500 million Driving the Nation Fund, which includes the rollout of 117 EV fast charging stations and hydrogen refueling stations for key freight routes, because there's so many trucks right now that use hydrogen. I don't know if there's any in Australia. If there is, let me know in the comments. So what's the goal with EVs in Australia? Net zero by 2050, meaning all cars have to be EVs by 2050 or something that's purely clean energy. and a 43% reduction in CO2 levels by 2030. That's been passed into law now. To help bolster the second-hand EV market, as well as cut CO2 outputs, the government in Australia has pledged that 75% of its fleet will make up EVs by 2025. That's a good thing. Governments buy EVs, then other people get to buy them second-hand at affordable prices. Small businesses are being encouraged to decarbonize with a $62 million funding package, including for electrification of their fleets. So what are the incentives in New South Wales? Well, $3,000 rebate for the first 25,000 EVs, which are priced under $69,000. Stamp duty is waived on both types of vehicles under $78,000, all from the 1st of September 2021. So no stamp duty, and you get that incentive if it's priced under $69,000. EV drivers can also use T2 and T3 transit lanes across New South Wales. Registration fee discounts as well. So unlike Victoria, registration fees are cheaper in New South Wales. There will be a tax to use an EV in New South Wales, but not until 2027. So you're looking at 4 years away, 2.5 cents per kilometre, starting on July the 1st, 2027. Charging network. New South Wales is actually doing an incredibly good job at building out charging network. It's invested more than any other state by far. $171 million in future investments in infrastructure, including $131 million on ultra-fast chargers is being spent, $20 million in grants for destination points, and $20 million for topping up public transportation hubs. Working to deliver 20 fast chargers along the state's major highways in partnership with NRMA. What's the uptake goal in New South Wales? 50% of all new cars sold to be EVs by 2030, net zero by 2050. In Victoria, you can get a $3,000 subsidy, which I got when I bought a BYD Atto 3 for the first 20,000 EVs sold, which are priced under $69,000. You get reduced stamp duty rates, plus a $100 discount on registration annually, but there is a tax. You do have to pay for each kilometre you drive your EV, and that could be one of the reasons why EV uptake is the lowest in Victoria of any major state. Any major populated state, so other than the Northern Territory, EV uptake has been the lowest in Victoria, which is quite surprising and disappointing, but it could be because of the negative press around the taxes the government in Victoria are applying to EVs. By the way, they're in the federal court right now, while the federal government is suing the Victorian government, which are on the same side of politics, because they believe that the EV taxes should be illegal as they're currently constituted. It's 2.6 cents per kilometre for every kilometre you drive your EV. Unfortunately, Victoria is spending a lot less money on EVs than New South Wales. $19 million will fund plans to quadruple the number of new charging stations statewide, and focusing on regional Victoria and popular tourist sites is the current goal. So none of that will be really spent on metropolitan areas. $5 million destination charging points across Victoria program will lead to the installation of an additional 141 fast charging stations in homes. Really, New South Wales is spending about 20 times more money on EV infrastructure than Victoria. So yeah, my suggestion is Daniel Andrews, probably not as positive as a lot of people claim, as a lot of people think. Bit of brainwashing going on here, I think. Anyway, the goals in Victoria are the same as New South Wales, but clearly a lot less money is being spent, so I don't think they're going to achieve them. That's realistic. Queensland. Incentives in Queensland are much, much greater than Victoria. In fact, much greater than anywhere else in Australia. You get a $6,000 rebate for the first 15,000 new EVs sold, up to $68,000 for the purchase price. The car registration for your EV is the lowest in Australia. It's only $263 per year. And there are no taxes. No taxes planned in the future, no taxes planned for now on each kilometre you drive. There's none of that going on in Queensland. Queensland is the best state in Victoria for incentives, taxes, everything. Except for all the money they're investing in infrastructure, which is still better than Victoria though. Queensland has invested in an electric superhighway, currently the longest electric fast charging highway in the world in a single state, with 31 EV plug-in sites running from the Gold Coast in Cairns and west from Brisbane to Toowoomba. There's 18 new charging sites that will be added to the superhighway in phase 3 of the government's strategy spreading into regional Queensland, and $10 million will build more charging stations. Queensland's goals for EVs are different to New South Wales and Victoria. They're aiming for 100% of eligible Queensland government fleet passenger vehicles to be zero emissions by 2026. That's very soon. There's only a couple of years before all government vehicles in Queensland will be EV only, and 50% of new passenger vehicle sales to be zero emission by 2030, moving to 100% by 2036. Queensland's going for almost a European goal here, 2036, 100% EV only in Queensland. I like this. ACT has the highest uptake of EVs of any state in Australia by a very, very wide mile. In the ACT, you get 2 years free registration for your EV. Older EVs are eligible for a 20% discount on registration fees. Stamp duty can be waived on vehicles purchased for the first time. And ACT drivers are also eligible to access up to $15,000 in interest-free loans to help cover the upfront purchase cost of an EV up to a cap of $77,500. But there are no discounts. In other words, there's no big lump sum payments when you buy an EV. Taxes. There are no taxes announced of any kind for EV driving in the ACT. However, there's one interesting thing that the ACT has planned. They're banning the sale of new petrol and diesel-powered cars from 2035. Basically, this ban is even more stringent than the European ban because there will be no sales of synthetic fueled cars in 2035. It'll just be EV only from 2035. Maybe hydrogen if they exist then, but either way, this is a really good decision by ACT's government. In the Northern Territory, EVs and plug-in hybrids get cheaper rego and stamp duty, and they also get grants for home, workplace, and public EV chargers and opportunities to offer to develop local skills to service technology and install infrastructure. Basically, probably has the worst incentives of any state in Australia. Little wonder why so few people in the Northern Territory have actually bought EVs. There are no taxes planned though for driving your EV in the Northern Territory, and the charging network, which currently has 32 stations, 30 public and 2 high-powered, plus the Territory government will install a minimum of 400 charging points at its buildings. However, residential and business grants are available to owners of EVs to buy and install EV chargers. This includes 100 residential grants of $1,000 and 80 business grants of $2,500, with a total of $300,000 being committed, only a very small amount of money. Now, in terms of its future goals with EVs, they don't really have any. They're not even worth talking about, so we'll move on. Tasmania, incentives. 2 years free stamp duty for new and second-hand EVs as of the 1st of July 2021. 2 years free rego purchased on purchases, plus 2 years free registration on EVs purchased by car rental companies and coach operators. They don't have any big incentives though, like other states such as New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland. There's no taxes though, none at all planned whatsoever. Now, there's no uptake goals for EVs on plans on whether or not they ban the sales of non-EVs at any point in the future. However, 100% of the government's fleet will be electric by 2030, which is a long way away. So that's not really an aggressive goal at all. South Australia, there are incentives in South Australia. You can get $3,000 off a purchase price at point of sale for a limited time up to a value of $69,000. Plus, you get 3 years free registration for vehicles registered from October the 28th, 2021 up to June the 30th, 2025. So 3 years of free registration means really you're getting an additional about $2,400 off the price as well. Plus, up to $2,000 to install EV smart chargers at homes, but that's limited to 7,500 households. So you want to get onto that one quick if you're in South Australia. Taxes in South Australia, well, they're kind of controversial. There was initially a plan to follow Victoria, but then they changed to say that the tax wouldn't start until 2027. However, it's been repealed. The reason being that public backlash caused the government to realize that actually wasn't going to get re-elected if it continued with the idea of having taxes on EVs, so it repealed the taxes. Charging network. They're planning to invest $13.4 million in its charging network, increasing points to 530 statewide, most of which will have a 7 kilowatt capacity, so pretty slow charges. What about uptake? Well, the South Australian government also plans for EVs to be a common choice by 2030, and the default by 2035. They didn't say how they plan on that to actually happen though, but it sounds like they're definitely planning to support EV uptake. Western Australia. In Western Australia, EVs are exempt from the 10% on-demand transport levy. They have the largest incentive offer in Australia, in some ways, kind of. There's a $3,500 rebate for the first 10,000 Western Australians to buy an EV. This applies to vehicles that cost less than $70,000 before on-road costs. So basically, this is probably the only state right now where you can buy a Tesla Model Y and get the full incentive. Taxes. There will be an EV tax which will start on July the 1st, 2027, 2 cents per kilometre. Now, Western Australia is spending a bit more money on EV infrastructure. 235 charging stations with varying charging capacity between 22 kilowatt to 350 kilowatt, which is the fastest speed of any government chargers. Plans to create Australia's longest EV charging network, adding 49 new chargers expected to be up and running by 2024. So it seems as though Queensland and Western Australia are competing to have the world's longest charging network. 23 million will be spent towards upgrading, expanding, and improving Western Australia's electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This includes 10 million allocated towards supporting not-for-profit and small to medium-sized businesses with grants of up to half of the cost of installing charging infrastructure. 5 million in grants for local government chargers, 4 million for the Public Transport Authority to trial the installation of up to 20 charging bays at 4 train stations, and more than 3 million for 8 new points across 4 locations on a section of National Highway 1 between Norseman and Eucla. Now, what about long-term goals? Well, 25% of government's fleet will be electric in 2025 or 2026, so a very low goal there, not setting the bar high, and they're planning on being net zero by 2050. Unfortunately, as you can see, Australian governments, whether that be local, federal, or state governments, they're not being anywhere near as aggressive as, say, for example, America, where the government is investing billions of dollars into electrification. Same with New Zealand. New Zealand's incentives are much, much higher than every single state in Australia, plus their infrastructure spending is higher as well. So yeah, Australia's got a long way to go in terms of government support. So I do agree with those of you who say that, make that claim. I don't talk about it all the time because it's sort of a negative thing and I don't feel like it really achieves anything, but I'm making the point here to say, Australian government, yes, you need to come to the party. The more you invest, the more you'll get back. Let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.